Hi, I'm Mahesh Natarajan. I'm a counselor, and as counselors, October 10th, which is World Mental Health Day, is a day of great importance to us. And this year, we wanted to talk about mental health in the corporate workspace. Is there a dialogue between the two? Do corporates talk about mental health? That's what we want to talk about and what we can do to make this better. In the corporate world, there's been a lot of dialogue around health of employees in general. A lot of it focusing on physical wellness. And it's not necessarily physical illness, right? We're talking about yoga, we're talking about diet, we're talking about so many things about how well employees are. And similarly, on the mental health front, there's a whole lot of things that go in the spectrum of mental health. There's certainly a certain segment of it which is about mental illness itself, about bipolar disorder or anything like that, which is a psychiatric illness. But beyond that, mental health is actually about relational health, emotional health, cognitive health. A lot of different aspects come into mental health. To break it down further, our mental wellness depends on how well we are as a family, how well we are integrated in our society. That's number one, that's a relational aspect. A second aspect is our emotional aspect, saying how well are we able to deal with the situations that life throws at us? Are we able to grieve when we have to? Are we able to be sad in a responsible way? Are we able to cope with the difficulties in a helpful manner? And the third thing is cognitive health, saying that are we able to think clearly? Do we have cognitive distortions? Do we tend to personalize things? Are we maximizing? Are we minimizing? Are we discounting what happens to us? So all these things put together create this thing called mental health. And one of the reasons why we emphasize this is that because there's so much stigma around mental illness, and really we're talking about a much wider spectrum of mental health. Let me start with sharing an experience that a client of mine had. This is a client who came through his organization's employee assistance program to talk about his depressive feelings. After the first couple of sessions, he felt empowered enough to go back and disclose to his manager that he was feeling quite low and he was coming and meeting a counselor. And his manager was quite supportive at the outset, told him to take his time, if he needed to take a couple of hours here and there to go and meet a counselor, he should feel free to do so. Everything sounded okay for a while. And then later on, as the sessions processed and he got better and he came back to his regular work life, when it came to appraisal time, he found himself in a bit of a spot. He wasn't very happy with his appraisal score. And when he challenged his manager about it, his manager kind of threw it back in his face and told him, listen, if you have any problems about your appraisal, go and talk to your therapist. You anyway have somebody that you can talk to, don't bug me about it. Said it jokingly, but such an off-the-cuff remark impacted my client quite severely, as you would expect. In the first place, the disclosure he had made about having been to meet a counselor was used against him. And secondly, somehow this idea that he's had a mental health issue seemed to have set him down from his peers, that the expectation of that he has to be at the best always, all the time, set him back. Together, these two things has really affected my client. And this is a story that you will hear everywhere. And that's one of the reasons why when employees come and meet counselors, many times they prefer to come in their own individual capacities, even if the organization has a supportive program. So between this fear of what the disclosure might do to them, will it be used against them, and the idea that employees have to be at their best all the time, everywhere, and that the organization cannot really be trusted to hold confidentiality, it creates a culture of silence around mental health in the workspace. So even though the business case for dealing with mental health is so strong, organizations often don't do it because of a series of beliefs, mistaken beliefs, myths that they have about mental health in the workplace. Let's deal with 5 of them today. The first of them is that mental health is a personal matter, it is not a professional matter, that people should just be left to deal with it by themselves. The reality is far from that. Mental health is quite a complex web of work and life and society. They're not isolated. And organizations often need to take a holistic point of view about mental health in the workplace. That this is something which is personal, which is professional, which is social, and it's not something just can be left alone for people to deal with in their personal space alone. So that's myth number one. A second myth is that workplace mental health is about just stress. Again, while stress and stress management is a key part of mental health, it's not just limited to that. A lot of different aspects of how mental health comes into workplaces, also because of the policies in the workplace, the kind of pressures, and even things like workplace lighting and the kind of environment that people have to go through in their workplace affects mental health. So workplace mental health is a lot more than just about stress management. Myth number 3 is that all that an organization needs to do is to set up an EAP program or an employee assistance program, which then magically outsources mental health to somebody else, and that's all that an organization needs to do. Again, it's far from the truth. People need to be able to be aware that the mental health issues at the workplace is not just about dealing with it as counselors. It's about policies, it's about benefits, it's about having non-discrimination policies, it's about being a safe workplace for everybody. A lot of that goes into being a safe workplace from a mental health perspective. A fourth myth that we could talk about is this idea that mental health is about mental illness. And reality is that while mental illness is one part of the mental health spectrum, mental health is a lot more. It includes everything from relational wellness, emotional wellness, cognitive wellness, mental capabilities, a lot of different things that come into the spectrum. The fifth myth is that all that it requires for somebody who's going through a mental health problem is a leave of absence, that shunt them away from work and let them deal with it and then come back when they're okay. Again, this is a myth for many different reasons. Number one is that it doesn't incapacitate a person from working necessarily. Sometimes, sure, maybe a leave of absence might be required, but most of the time, a reasonable accommodation is all that it really takes for a person to be able to work through whatever difficulty that they're having at that time. And the second part of it is that just by outsourcing it or leaving it outside the organization doesn't necessarily take care of it. We need to be able to have a dialogue with the person who's going through a difficulty, have a dialogue with the team that the person works in, to make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on and how they need to support it, and if there is a systemic issue that is causing this mental health issue, that is addressed. The thing is that since there is so much of silence around mental health, corporates often believe that there is no business case for dealing with mental health in the workplace, when really the truth is far from that. The reality is that each person, every individual goes through at least one major mental health issue in their lifetime. And 1 in 5 of us at any given time has a mental health issue going on. So it's really a significant problem. There are studies which show that about 12.5% of all employee absences are due to mental health issues, even if they're not reported as such. Because like we said earlier, people don't talk about mental health so much. Right? And another study shows that 20% of the loss of productivity is due to mental health issues. So the business case is quite clear. Between all of these things, if you look at it, that almost 20 to 25% of business is lost, productivity is lost because of mental health concerns. So it is irrefutable, the science is irrefutable, the data is irrefutable, and it really is imperative that organizations act on these statistics and talk about mental health, make it a lot more accessible for people, and break this culture of silence around mental health.